My brother stalked and assaulted my girlfriend at a wedding. My parents defended him, now he's in prison for domestic violence. My brother crossed a serious line, he stalked and assaulted my girlfriend. Then, during a wedding, my own parents chose to defend him. Now he's sitting in prison for domestic violence. The moment Victoria, my girlfriend, she's 25, walked into the room, Samuel started acting totally out of line. His behavior made her visibly uncomfortable right from the start. He practically shoved our mom aside just so he could be the first to greet Victoria, and then he hugged her for way too long, so long that she had to pull back physically just to get some space. All through dinner, he kept coming up with weird excuses to touch her shoulder or brush against her arm. He'd crack these so-called inside jokes that didn't make any sense because, honestly, they'd only just met. And he wouldn't stop elbowing past me to sit closer to her, like he was trying to claim some kind of spot. It all came to a head when he tried feeding her with his own fork, staring at her with this uncomfortable, intense eye contact while doing it. Victoria was clearly uneasy, but she kept her cool and stayed polite. It was our first big family get-together, and she was doing her best to make a good impression. Meanwhile, Samuel kept dragging up embarrassing childhood stories about me, twisting the facts to make me look like a total loser. At one point, he straight up lied and told everyone this made-up story about how he had to rescue my high school girlfriend from my emotional abuse, something that never happened. Victoria already knew the truth about my past because I'd shared it with her, but my parents just sat there nodding like Samuel was reading straight from a Bible. After dinner, things took an even darker turn. Trying to be helpful, Victoria offered to help clean up. I was out in the garage giving my dad a hand with some boxes when I realized she'd been gone a while. I went to check, and that's when I found her stuck in the kitchen, with Samuel blocking her path. He had her backed up by the sink, practically trapping her there, telling her she deserved someone more exciting than, and I quote, his boring, unstable older brother. He was way too close, leaning in with one hand pressed against the counter, just inches from her hip. Victoria had already told him, twice, to back off before I even got there. When she spotted me, she looked totally relieved and immediately came over to stand next to me. Samuel just laughed like it was all one big joke, but I could feel Victoria shaking. We'd been together 8 months at that point, and everything had been great, perfect, even, until Samuel decided to barge in with his obsessive nonsense and tried to tear everything apart. I guess I need to give a little background for any of this to make sense. Samuel and I grew up in a quiet little town in Minnesota. We came from an upper-middle-class family. Our parents both work in real estate and do pretty well financially. But honestly, they've always cared way more about how things looked from the outside than what was really going on inside the family. Samuel was born when I was 3, and from the very beginning, he became their golden child. No matter what happened, he could do no wrong, and somehow, I always ended up being the one blamed. He showed some pretty alarming behavior growing up, but our parents never seemed to care. When he was 6, he smashed my gaming console just because I wouldn't let him use it when he wanted. Instead of disciplining him, my parents went out and bought him his own, and told me it was my fault for not sharing. Then when he was 12, he killed my pet hamster by feeding it chocolate, knowing full well that it was dangerous. My parents just brushed it off as an accident, and said if I couldn't keep an eye on my pets, I shouldn't have them. In high school, he spread rumors that I cheated on my girlfriend, which led to us breaking up. When I confronted him, my parents actually said he was just being protective. This toxic pattern didn't stop once we became adults. Samuel still lives at home with our folks, works for my dad at the real estate office, and pretty much does whatever he pleases. Meanwhile, he's made it his mission to sabotage every single relationship I've ever had. With the girlfriend I dated before Victoria, he somehow convinced her family that I had a gambling problem. Total lie. And before that, he told another girl I'd cheated on all my exes. Also completely false. Every time something like this happened, my parents either backed him up or told me I was being dramatic. So when I met Victoria, I took a new approach. I didn't say a word about her to my family for the first 3 months we were dating. I just wanted to protect her from Samuel's usual chaos. And Victoria? She's honestly the best thing that's ever happened to me. Smart, kind-hearted, and works as a pediatric nurse at our local hospital. We first met at the hospital cafe, of all places. I was grabbing a coffee while visiting a coworker who just had surgery, and she was on her break. We started talking about how bad the hospital coffee was, and one conversation led to another. Before I knew it, we were dating, and everything felt completely right. Victoria knew all about my family history because I didn't want her going in blind. She was the one who actually suggested meeting them, Thought maybe things would go differently now that we were all grown up. She always tries to see the best in people, and honestly, that's one of the many reasons I love her. Eventually, I agreed to set up a dinner party so she could meet everyone. That night ended up being the spark that lit the fuse. A few days after the dinner, things started getting creepy. Victoria began receiving strange calls and texts from numbers she didn't recognize. At first, it was just silence or hang-ups as soon as she answered. Then, the voicemails started, weird and disturbing stuff, calling her names like frigid and stuck up for supposedly turning down a better man. Some of those messages even mentioned what she was wearing that day or when she left work, which made it clear someone was watching her. At first, Victoria didn't put the pieces together. But I recognized a few of the voices, guys Samuel used to hang out with back in high school. Most of them still do. They're basically his little crew, still orbiting around him because he throws money at them, courtesy of our parents. When Victoria blocked those numbers, they just kept switching to new ones. Then it got worse. Some of Samuel's buddies started showing up at the hospital, pretending to be visitors. But they weren't there for anyone, they just loitered near the pediatric wing, watching her, whispering things loud enough to unsettle her. Just last week, one of them followed her all the way to her car after a night shift. Victoria was so shaken up, she called me from her car, crying. She was too scared to drive home, terrified someone might be following her. I rushed over, and we ended up having to drive her car back with my buddy trailing us the whole way, just to make sure we weren't being followed. Lately, she's been having panic attacks before work, and her coworkers have started to notice something's off. It's gotten that bad. Yesterday, I finally reached my breaking point, and I had enough proof to finally confront Samuel face to face. I'd gathered recordings of the voicemails, screenshots of the texts, even security footage from the hospital that showed his friends stalking Victoria around the pediatric ward. I headed over to our parents' place. Samuel still lives there, and laid all the evidence out in front of him. You'd think he'd deny it or act shocked, but no. He just sat there with this smug little grin on his face, like it was some kind of game. Then he looked me straight in the eye and said, "I have no clue what you're talking about. But maybe if Victoria wasn't such a stuck-up bitch, people wouldn't feel the need to teach her a lesson." That was it. Something inside me snapped. I punched him square in the face. Now, I didn't even hit him that hard, just enough to give him a bloody nose. But Samuel acted like I tried to murder him. He started wailing like a kid throwing a tantrum. Our parents came running in, and of course, they went off on me. Not Samuel. They didn't even glance at the evidence I was still holding. My mom lost it, crying over her. Poor baby boy. While my dad started yelling about how I've always been jealous of Samuel, and that I need therapy to manage my anger. I tried to explain everything, the stalking, the harassment, the fear Victoria was living in. But Mom actually blamed Victoria. She said Victoria must have flirted with Samuel during dinner and was now playing the victim because she got caught. I couldn't believe it. Then Dad told me to get the hell out and not come back until I apologized to Samuel and got my head on straight. So now I'm writing this from Victoria's apartment. I've been here since last night. She finally cried herself to sleep in the other room, completely drained. She's terrified to go into work tomorrow. Her supervisor's been understanding so far, but Victoria's afraid she's going to lose her job if this harassment keeps escalating. She loves her job, loves the kids in the pediatric ward, and she shouldn't have to give that up just because my brother has completely lost his mind. I honestly don't know what to do anymore. Every time I think Samuel can't possibly sink any lower, he finds a new way to prove me wrong. Our parents? They're enabling him. They're gaslighting both me and Victoria, acting like none of this is real. And the police? They won't do anything unless we have rock-solid proof that Samuel is behind the harassment directly. So now Victoria's living in constant fear, her job's at risk, and somehow, we're being treated like the troublemakers. Has anyone else been in a situation like this? How the hell do I protect someone I love when my own family is this toxic? Should I be collecting more evidence? Recording more conversations? I'm at the end of my rope here and could really use some advice. First off, I just want to say thank you to everyone who commented on my first post. Reading through all your replies made me realize how serious this situation really is, and both Victoria and I have been doing our best to follow your advice, especially when it comes to documenting everything and getting legal help involved. But honestly, things have only gotten worse over the past couple weeks, and I really need to get this off my chest. We did go to the police, just like so many of you suggested. We spent hours gathering everything, screenshots of the threatening texts, recordings of those disgusting voicemails, hospital security footage showing Samuel's friends lurking around, all of it. We even had signed statements from 3 of Victoria's co-workers who had witnessed the stalking firsthand. At first, the officer we spoke with seemed like he was taking it seriously, especially the stuff happening at her job. But then it all got complicated. Turns out, one of Samuel's closest friends, Tyler, one of the main guys involved in harassing Victoria, is actually the son of a local police sergeant. And as soon as we mentioned Tyler's name, the whole vibe in the room changed. The officer started backpedaling, saying they couldn't really do anything unless we had direct proof tying Samuel to the harassment. Then he started implying that maybe Victoria was reading too much into things, that maybe these guys were just hanging out at the hospital for innocent reasons. The worst part? He straight up asked if maybe Victoria had somehow encouraged their attention. We asked if we could speak to someone else, preferably a female officer, but they gave us the runaround. Eventually, they said they'd give warnings to the people we could ID from the footage, but without hard proof of direct threats, that was as far as they'd go. It was demoralizing. A total waste of time. And my parents? Somehow they managed to make everything worse. The day after we went to the police, Samuel showed up at their place sporting a fresh black eye and claiming I'd attacked him, again. Which was total BS. I hadn't even seen him since the night I punched him 2 weeks ago. Still, my parents didn't hesitate. They believed every word out of his mouth. My mom called me in hysterics, crying about how I was dangerous and destroying Samuel's life. She even said that going to the cops just proved I was out to ruin him over a little misunderstanding. Then my dad called, furious. He threatened to cut me off financially, which would have been terrifying if I actually depended on them. Luckily, I've got a solid job in software development and my own place. He also warned me that if I didn't stop this nonsense, he'd fire me from the family real estate business, completely forgetting that I've never even worked there. That's Samuel's gig, not mine. It really showed me how little they see me as my own person, just an extra in Samuel's life story. But the real disaster? That hit last weekend. After all the yelling and threats, my mom suddenly flipped the script. She started texting and calling nonstop, saying they wanted to fix things as a family. She said Samuel was ready to apologize, that he finally understood he'd crossed the line. She swore they had talked to him about boundaries and that he was sorry for what he'd done to Victoria. After some long talks, Victoria and I decided, against our better judgment, to give them one last chance. We agreed to go over for a family dinner. A chance to clear the air, maybe rebuild some trust. But from the second we walked through that front door, I could tell something was off. I wish I had better news. I really do. But things completely fell apart at my cousin Holly's wedding last weekend, and I've needed a few days just to wrap my head around it all. What should have been a happy celebration ended in chaos, Samuel in handcuffs, and our entire family shattered for good. Here's some background. Holly has always been one of the few family members, along with my grandfather, who saw through Samuel's golden boy act. When we were kids, she caught him torturing her cat. She told everyone, but my parents spun it like she was making it up for attention. She never forgot that. And when all this started with Victoria, Holly was firmly in our corner. She even gave our lawyer a signed statement detailing Samuel's disturbing behavior over the years. When Holly sent us the wedding invite, Victoria and I weren't sure about going. But Holly called us personally. She promised Samuel was only invited because her parents insisted, and that she'd hired extra security just to keep an eye on him. She also made sure we'd be seated far from him and my parents, over at a table with her husband's side of the family. With so many witnesses around and security on duty, we figured Samuel wouldn't dare try anything. We were wrong. The ceremony went smoothly. Samuel was one of the groomsmen, and Holly's husband, who's from the other side of the family, didn't know anything about the drama. At the reception, everything seemed calm at first. Samuel was at the family table with our parents, while Victoria and I were seated across the room with Holly's in-laws. For the first time in weeks, Victoria actually started to relax. Around 9 p.m., she got up to use the restroom. After 10 minutes, I noticed Samuel's seat was empty. I felt this sinking feeling in my gut and got up to check on her. As I was heading toward the hallway by the bathrooms, I suddenly heard Victoria scream. I took off running. Just ahead of me, Holly's husband Miller and his brother rounded the corner, and that's when we saw it. Samuel had Victoria pinned up against the wall outside the bathroom. He was trying to force himself on her while she fought to get away. One of his hands was clamped over her mouth, and the other was gripping her arms so tightly that it left bruises. I wasn't planning on posting again. After everything, I thought we were finally done with that part of our lives. But something happened yesterday that I can't ignore. And honestly, I feel both vindicated and heartbroken. Before I get into it, here's a quick update on where Victoria and I are now. We got married 2 years ago, just a small ceremony with her side of the family and Holly's. It was perfect. We bought a house in our new city, and Victoria's now the head pediatric nurse at her hospital. I'm still working remotely for the same company, and last year I got promoted to senior developer. And the biggest news? We're expecting our first baby, a little girl, due in 3 months. Life has been quiet, peaceful, happy, until yesterday. I was in a meeting when my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. The calls were coming from random numbers, which I usually ignore because my family's notorious for getting new phones to get around my blocks. But then I saw the voicemail from my mom, and it sounded desperate. I mean, panicked. So I called her back. She was sobbing so hard, I could barely make out her words. But once she calmed down enough to speak, she told me something I never expected to hear. Turns out, Samuel got married last year. None of us knew. No one told us. We've had zero contact with that side of the family since the wedding disaster. Apparently, he met a woman named Rachel through church. Their families arranged a quick marriage, and according to my mom, everything seemed picture perfect at first. She went on about how Rachel was this good Christian girl who finally understood Samuel. Everyone was thrilled. Until last week. Last Thursday, Rachel didn't show up to work for 3 days. A concerned coworker called the police. When officers did a welfare check, they found Rachel at home, badly injured, 2 broken ribs, a fractured wrist, and bruises covering most of her body. But what shook me to my core was what the police found out next. Rachel told them everything. Samuel had started beating her just 2 months into their marriage. And whenever she tried to get help or even just leave, my dad stepped in, just like he always did for Samuel. He used his connections in real estate to manipulate Rachel's family. He'd threaten their mortgage, hint at getting her fired from her job at a company owned by one of his friends. He even convinced her parents that she was mentally unstable. Same playbook. Same lies. Same manipulation they used on Victoria. The final straw? Rachel got a promotion, something that would have made her financially independent. That's when Samuel snapped. I've been getting a lot of messages asking what happened with Samuel, my dad, and Rachel, so here's what's gone down in the last 6 months. First off, some good news from my side. Victoria and I welcomed our daughter, Emma, 3 months ago. She's happy, healthy, and honestly the most beautiful little human I've ever seen. Becoming parents has been the greatest thing that's ever happened to us, and it's just confirmed for both of us that cutting my family off was absolutely the right decision. Holly and her husband came out to visit last month and meet Emma. Watching them hold her, laugh with her, and love on her, that's what real family looks like. No manipulation, no guilt trips, no pretending. As for updates on the case, Holly's been keeping us in the loop since she still talks to some of the extended family. Samuel accepted a plea deal last month. He's been sentenced to 8 years in prison for aggravated domestic violence, with the chance of parole after 5. My dad's case is still playing out, but word is his legal team is trying to cut a deal too. His real estate license has been suspended, and nearly all his business partners have walked away. But the biggest surprise has been my mom. After our last phone call, she actually started therapy. Holly says she's moved out of the family home and officially filed for divorce from Dad. Last week, I got a handwritten letter from her, 12 pages long. She apologized for everything, for enabling Samuel, for not protecting me as a kid, and for how they treated Victoria. She admitted that she and my father basically turned Samuel into what he became by never making him take responsibility. I haven't answered her letter. Part of me respects that she's finally seeing things clearly. But another part of me can't stop thinking, where was all this clarity when Samuel was hurting animals as a kid? When he tormented Victoria? When she stood there and watched him assault her niece at a wedding? Victoria and I have talked a bit about maybe letting Mom have some kind of supervised relationship with Emma someday. But that's a long way off, years, if it happens at all. Rachel, thankfully, is doing better. She's staying with her sister in another state and getting serious therapy. She's filed for divorce and is working closely with the prosecutors. Through Holly, we've learned that more women have come forward, 2 from Samuel's church, among others. The police are now investigating a pattern of behavior that spans years. Rachel's parents have really stepped up too. They've apologized publicly for not believing her sooner and have cut all contact with my parents. They're even working with domestic violence groups now, helping other families recognize red flags before it's too late. Our extended family split down the middle. Most of the younger cousins and relatives are supporting Rachel and us. But the older generation? Many of them are still in denial, making excuses for Samuel and Dad, just like always. One silver lining is that Holly's mom, my aunt, started a family support group. It's for the relatives who do want to break the cycle, who want to learn and do better for their kids and grandkids. As for me and Victoria, we're just focused on the life we're building. Victoria went back to work part-time last week and has already been promoted to Director of Pediatric Nursing. I'm still remote, but I'm thinking about starting my own consulting business soon. We've got great friends here, our chosen family, and a strong community. Sometimes, I think about replying to my mom's letter. But then I look at Emma's little face, and I remember, if we had stayed in contact, my parents would have expected me to let Samuel be part of her life. They'd say he deserves another chance. And that thought alone reminds me, walking away was the right choice. The cycle of abuse, the silence, the excuses, it ends with me. Emma's going to grow up in a home filled with love, trust, and people who know how to respect boundaries. No manipulation. No gaslighting. No pretending bad behavior doesn't exist. Sometimes the hardest, most loving thing you can do for your child is walk away from the people who raise you, when they refuse to change. And that's exactly what I did.